Hi, how's it going? Welcome back to Family and Fit, where we talk fitness and how to integrate it in your busy lifestyle. So today we're bringing you another theory series video where we essentially talk controversial topics and things that may or may not have been researched very deeply. Just trying to open up people's point of view on things, not being so close-minded and whatnot, and just some ideas to throw around so that way we can talk shop. So today's topic will be variation and potentially never hitting any plateaus. And the main thing to target is constantly switching it up and almost never sticking to a actual routine, whereas every day that you go in you're essentially hitting different workouts in different orders, different weight ranges, different rep ranges, and so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So a lot of times whenever you go into a fitness routine, it's very strict regimen. You go in here, you perform this lift, you perform the next lift, you perform the next lift, and then on your next workout session you're going to be working on a different muscle group. And this all depends on what kind of fitness routine that you're going for, because there's push-pull legs, there's upper, lower. Just check out some of the other videos that I got, or there's all kinds of other videos on YouTube to kind of explain some of those different lifting methods if you don't know what they are. But essentially, all these routines give you a structure. And whereas I believe structure can be very good, I also believe that you need variation, and sometimes by doing structure can cause you to hit plateaus and may potentially not even know that you've hit a plateau until a couple weeks or a month or maybe even 3 months has passed. Because to be honest, a lot of times it can be hard to judge if you've actually hit a plateau or not. You know, you could actually be lifting the same weight and be muscularly growing and actually not climbing your weight up at all, but if you don't pay close enough attention and your workout sessions are far enough apart, you won't really be able to tell that your workouts are getting easier and easier. So say for instance you're doing dumbbell press at 75 pounds and you did 10 reps. You might hit that same weight, the same amount of reps time after time, but maybe the first time you did them, on the 10th rep you could barely get it. Well, then after going through all those sessions, you finally reached to a point where that last session you was able to get 10 easy and probably could have got 11 or 12. And it's a lot of times it's hard to track that type of stuff. So if you did reach a point where, say for instance, you're doing 75 pounds at 10 reps and you just can't climb the reps and you just can't go up in weight and you just feel like you're not making any progress, well, this is where variation really comes in. Because if you're hitting the 10 reps at 75 pounds, your body's going to get used to and adapt to lifting that amount of weight for that amount of reps. And it doesn't allow for other muscle fibers that are designed to lift different loads in a different manner. You have fast twitch muscle fibers and you have slow twitch muscle fibers, whereas your fast twitch are going to be for lifting heavy weights, and they're intended to be a little bit more explosive. They do not have very good endurance at all. Their endurance sucks. But then again, you have the other spectrum of your slow twitch muscle fibers, which are going to be very good for endurance, but they're not going to be very good for strength. And different muscle groups and different muscles within the body are made up of these different ratios of these two muscle fibers. Now, majority of the body is 50-50. There are quite a few very major body parts that are not. Say for instance like your biceps, they're actually made up more of the fast twitch muscle fiber, which means really when you're training your biceps, you should be leaning towards the more heavy weightlifting for biceps than doing a lot of reps. And I think that's something that a lot of people do, is they're doing a lot of reps for biceps, and you know I was guilty of that as well. By adding in variation, you can curve around some of those factors. Like if you're doing a hybrid style lift like I do, that's very good for a basic lifter as well, because if you do a hybrid style lift where you're lifting a heavy weight at low reps and you're lifting a lower weight at high reps, you get both spectrums of that. So you don't necessarily have to know which muscle fibers are within that muscle group that you're working. Now, there will be some gains left on the table because, for example, if you have your biceps, which I think are close to like 60 to 75% fast twitch muscle fiber, the way that I would plan that out in a routine is technically I would have 75% of my volume be coming from heavy weightlifting. I would try to have my volume of weightlifting being the same as the volume of that type of muscle fiber within the muscle group. That way you're putting stimuli to the muscle group that has the most volume within the muscle. That way you're going to get the most growth, you're going to get the most strength. Basically, you're just get the biggest bang for your buck going that route. And that's one of my favorite things about hybrid style lifting. And on top of that, with the hybrid style lifting, I'm keeping my volume per session really, really low, like 5 to 7 sets. But then I'm working out the same muscle group like every other day. So I really like that because I never really get truly sore, but I'm always feeling pumped and always feeling voluminous, and I'm always feeling like I'm getting work in. And, you know, if it's like a down day and I just don't really feel like going to the gym, I go in anyway, I hit a few, I'm like, it's easy to tell yourself, like, oh, dude, you only got like 5, 7 sets. Like, it's that easy. Like, it's not difficult. You know, it takes like 30, 45 minutes at most to hit 5 to 7 sets, and that's if you're slow jacking it. That explains one form of variation where you're doing a hybrid style lifting, where you're doing heavyweight, low reps, and where you're doing lightweight, high reps. Let's get into the next form of variation. Now, I'm kind of trying to list these as major variations. I have what's called major variations and minor variations. If you look at my variations video, I dive deeper into that. But I'm going to go ahead and give you all a brief summary of what I consider major variation and minor variation. So a major variation would be, say for instance, we'll use the upper body as an example. You're doing a compound movement like the dumbbell bench press, okay? So a form of major variation would be something such as doing a flat bench versus an incline bench versus a decline bench. And then for the back, that'd be something like doing lat pull downs versus seated rows versus shrugs or some type of vertical pulling motion. So with this form of variation, you're going to basically be changing what muscle fibers are actually activated. Whereas in the first type of variation, you are targeting 2 different muscle fiber types. This will be more of a matter of targeting the same muscle type, but in a different range within the muscular group. So say for instance, if you're doing a decline bench press, you're going to be targeting more under the chest, versus if you're doing an incline, you're going to be targeting more of the upper part of your chest. So this major variation will really dictate where you're going to grow your muscle, where you're going to grow your strength. And generally, as a rule of thumb, the exercise that you work out, the exercise you use to lift and to make progress with, is where you will see the most gains and the most results. Now you can go to a different major variation and still have made progress just because muscularly you've grown and you've grown within strength. You still need to add variation and put in some volume to these different major variations. For example, my lifting regimen right now is for my hypertrophy day, I'll do like 5 to 7 sets of incline dumbbell press, and then I will go into like a decline dumbbell press for like 3 sets. That way I'm just getting in some variation on my hypertrophy day. But my main target is to increase the volume of my chest, and overall just that's something I want to focus on, and I'm using it for my hypertrophy day so that way I can keep the weight lighter. I've kind of struggled with having like shoulder issues. My joints just genetically are not very sound. They're kind of, just whatever they are. The next form of variation is what I would consider a minor variation. So this would be something like you're taking the seated row, for example, and you're going to change the hand grip at which you're lifting the weight. So you might use a hand grip that has the handles that are like this, or you might use something that has wider handles like that, or maybe your hands are over the top of the bar, under the bar, and all these different variations will give you different results. And some of them can actually be more of a major variation. So say for instance, going overhand versus underhand, that can actually make your traps activate a lot more than doing the overhand. And so I guess I kind of need to break down the difference between major and minor variation. So what I consider a major variation is it going to completely work out another muscle group, or is it going to completely target a different part of the muscle or different fibers within the muscle, almost to the point of completely being able to isolate away from. Traps are one of the harder muscles to hit, just because you almost have to put emphasis on the traps because they're very short range of motion, and their job within the human body is very limited. They don't have much of a job in the human body. The main thing for your traps are to basically keep your shoulder from pulling out. It holds that weight. It gives you a slight ability to just do this lifting motion here. And if you just keep things in mind, like there's not too many things where you're walking around on a daily basis doing that. And also when you're working out, like seated rows is probably the closest thing you would ever get to it without actually directly targeting them. And you can do some other stuff too, like leaning back. But that's where the major variation comes in. And the main distinguishing factor of being a major variation versus a minor variation, because the major variation is going to target a lot of different muscle groups or muscle fibers and almost isolate the others. So it's going to be like an on-off type of thing. Whereas a minor variation is going to be the muscle fibers are still being worked pretty equally, but you might change, say for instance, like let's use upper chest to lower chest. You might change the ratio of how much you're working one or the other. Whereas maybe instead of being 50-50, you have 40-60%, like 40% upper, 60% lower, and then maybe you do some type of hand grip change where it flips that and does the opposite. You're doing 40% lower, 60% upper. So the ratio of what fibers are being activated is switched a lot less. And that basically what we'll do over time is we'll cause some muscle fibers within the muscle to be broke down a little bit more. So say for instance if you're wanting to work on your upper chest, or like if you're working on your trap, if you want to really focus on your traps but you don't want to do any trap type of exercises, you can indirectly focus on them by switching your hand grip to like an underneath hand grip. And by doing that, as soon as you go back into this back range, you're going to target them a little bit more than what you would just having maybe just a regular handle grip, neutral handle grip. There's another form of variation, which is, I would kind of consider it a major variation, but it doesn't really fall into my major minor variation category, because those are basically to describe the way the muscle fibers being worked out and the percentage of muscle fibers that are being switched on and off by doing a different style of workout. But this one is going to be basically how you plan your workouts. If you're doing an upper lower, or if you're doing a push-pull legs, or if you're doing a full body workout, those type of workout routines can actually make a tremendous difference on how much progress you make and where your progress will be at. I'll give you a prime example of how this went in my own life. So I did push-pull legs for like a year and a half, and that was the program I ran, push-pull legs for that whole entire year and a half. And then I switched it up to a upper lower just because I was getting crunched down on time. I was missing gym sessions, so I was like, how can I miss more gym sessions but not miss lifts and not push workouts further out? Now I can do an upper lower rest if I want to, versus if I do a push-pull legs rest, I only have 1 day in there versus the 2 days in there for a rest day, or just a day I can't make it to the gym. I don't generally take rest days, but there always ends up being days throughout the week that I just can't work out. So things get pushed back, and that's just part of it. So whenever I went into this upper-lower routine, what had happened to me is my forearms started getting burnt out. Matter of fact, my forearms were getting so burnt out from not being used to lifting my chest and my back in the same day that I actually occurred like a small injury in my wrist. Not like I was lifting and all of a sudden I pulled a muscle or anything like that, but it was like one of those like you pulled a muscle where like the next day and months to follow, I didn't notice it that day. I didn't even notice it for a couple days later. I thought it was just muscle pain from working out, and then I just noticed like session after session this pain was not going away, and it was like a deeper kind of like a maybe inflamed the tendon or did pull a muscle, but it was more of like an acute type of pull versus like a major pull where I really damaged something. But it just had this like agging little pain in my forearm because of going as hard as I normally go and not tapering back. I should have tapered back a little bit when I jumped into that lifting routine. And so that can just overall, that variation there has so many variables within it, because you got to think if you're like supersetting from chest to back, you're going to be more exhausted, so therefore cardiovascularly you're not going to have as much gas in you. But then again, you're going to look at other things like, well, maybe you're more energetic because you're constantly moving and you're not really taking any breaks, or there's all kinds of ways that you can structure that program on its own. You could do your chest for the first half of the session, you could do your back for the second half of the session, or you could do like I just mentioned before with supersetting it back and forth. And all these little variations make a huge difference. Do you do an arm day? Do you not do an arm day? All these things can make a tremendous difference, and I believe by sticking with one routine, especially for like as long as I stuck with my push-pull legs, I definitely think I should have transitioned into an upper-lower. I believe variation should be added in more frequently. So instead of doing push-pull legs for months and months and months, and then switching to an upper-lower for months and months and months, that it may be better to do kind of like how I am with my hybrid style lifting, where one session's heavy, next session's light. One session's heavy, one session's light. Now with the workout routine, as far as like going from an upper lower to push-pull legs, that'd be kind of a hard routine to switch up, because then you're going to take some break days in there to kind of let certain muscle groups heal, or if you went to doing back after doing an upper lower, then your chest is going to be off a day. So that is a little bit harder to add some variation in, but there's other things that you can change on a daily basis. Like say for instance, this session you go in and you do flat bench. Next session you go in, you do incline bench. And then you can keep that going back and forth with that. Same thing with doing like maybe legs. Since we don't got any example for legs, maybe you do squats for your first exercise, and that's the most voluminous part of your exercise. You do 5 to 7 sets of squats. Then on your next session, instead of starting off with squats and doing 5 to 7 sets of squats, you do your 5 to 7 sets of leg press or something. And just that variation can make a huge difference. Or let's say for instance, if you're working on your glutes, maybe you're a female and you're really trying to work on your glutes, and that's like something you're really trying to focus on. Well, how about this session right here? You start off with doing some glute isolation exercises, and then you go into doing some compound movements like a squat. And then the next session you come into your compound movement like a squat first, and then you do the glute isolation movements. Now I generally do not condone doing any isolation movement before your compound movement, but for certain muscle groups, and when you're really trying to target that muscle group, sometimes it can be better to target that muscle group a little bit before doing a workout, to give you a little pre-activation, a little pre-exhaustion. So yeah, let me know what you think about variation, and if you think that it's really important to have different types of variation, how often you should switch out your variation. If you just want me to do another video on variation, I can talk about variation all day. That's one of the things with fitness and most fitness routines, is they do not allow for much variation, especially when it comes to major variation. So it's something that I love to do. It keeps my workouts exciting. It keeps muscle growing. Like I pretty much never hit plateaus, especially when I'm targeting on something. Like say for instance, my bench press may not have climbed over this last year too much, but I've also done no bench press whatsoever. And that's just been because of gym limitations that I have and whatnot. Let me know if you would like to see any more content regarding variation, or just overall like this theory series type of video. Put it down in the comments below. And thank you all for watching. If y'all stuck around to the end, I'll catch y'all in the next one.